It's almost like they have learned more about our psychology than we have learned about theirs. When I say ours and theirs, I mean the feminine types, right, who are now politicized. Remember, this is a group that had no power,
Yeah.
but from the time of the Frankfurt School and arguably before, it's been highly weaponized, and it has studied us so well, because one of my biggest messages is we've got to turn that around, and I personally have tracked it to all sorts of extraordinary things. One way of looking at it is when women of certain cultures, and these would be the more gynocratic women, actually did physically observe tribes where the father-son relationship was very strong. This does happen. And they objected to it. And so a lie mechanism was begun in which women would learn to lie about paternity. And we can go into that now. We'll have to maybe explore that in another show or whatever. But they didn't come up with that lie just because one day somebody woke up and said, let's just lie to men about their paternity. No, it came from observing something they disliked, something that they knew if it continued would ultimately undermine female supremacy. And it's nothing more than the father-son bond. It did exist. And then women seeing it, some women seeing it, started, these matriarchal leaders said, we don't want it. So then what happened was a centuries-long, right up to the Grecian period, what we would know in the rise of the Hellenic period, or just the Grecian period, followed by the Roman, and then the modern and all that, or the Christian and then the modern. But just before the Hellenic period, women had for centuries lied systematically to men about paternity, right? Some men knew about it, but the vast majority were told a pack of lies. And that was to maintain female supremacy. So what does this mean in modern, terms? It means that all of feminism's endless critiquing about some aberration in the masculine or solar world, right? The patriarchy is constantly deconstructed and critiqued. Yeah, but feminism is only doing that not because there is an actual, right, aberration within patriarchy, right? No, there is. That's wrong. They want to make it that there's errors and flaws and aberrations within the phenomenon we know as patriarchy. When in fact, once you finally crack this nut, you find out that it is merely to reinstantiate female supremacy that is the movement behind world global feminism, right? Not because there are objectionable things in patriarchy, don't get me wrong, but not to the level we're talking about of a wholesale collapse in the phenomena. So one must get it right when you're dealing with these feminists, which I don't actually advocate, but anyway, imagine hypothetically you're in conversation with one of these fruitcakes. The way to combat them is through the things I've systematically laid down in my work. And one of them is to show them that their ardor, their passion for deconstructing masculinity and patriarchy is not because there is actual flaws in it, but because there is a previous primordial rivalry to that patriarchy, which is the supremacy of femininity, the feminine. And that needs to be reinstantiated by these people, and is a very much a subconscious drive. And others, it's conscious who've studied it, and others, it's just an engine, an atavistic throwback. Right? And then, of course, once you commit to that, a woman will then happily find all sorts of aberrations. So the history of feminism is really the discovery or the finding of this and that flaw and this and that error in order to throw in the face of masculinity. But what I'm doing is going back to the nucleus of why this thing happened. Because they didn't want the father-son, which is the essence of patriarchy, and there's nothing evil about it. Not one thing evil about the father-son relationship. But it is that's what patriarchy really is when you boil the phenomena back. And that is what affronted the women who said, but then that weakens our urbanization and many of the other motifs that come with matriarchy. That father-son relationship is contra to it. And we must make sure that it is weakened. And they weakened it by a wholesale lie, which no one on this bloody planet addresses but myself. I found it in all sorts of places, subtly put. But what it amounted to was centuries and centuries and centuries of deception, which if the man was the culprit, oh my God, see if you turn this around and you say, well, the feminists dug up something of this magnitude, we would be crawling around, we'd be forced to crawl around hands and feet, and they'd have a day in the week where we'd have to worship at shrines of the female. Go, sorry, here's a few candles, as a man, I recognize our historical, but on the other side, women have shown no guilt, no contrition, don't even really know about it. It's in the Old Testament, sort of, somewhat, there. But again, you won't find a woman who wastes one tear on the history of female crime going on for millennia, and which weakened the father-son bond, which in turn then changed the whole direction and constitution of what we call civilization. So back to the original point. I don't believe we have masculinity. I don't even believe we've got real civilization. We've got a pathetic, weakened simulacra of, like, weakened somebody mixing concrete, but unfortunately they were half asleep and they didn't do it properly. And so the very concrete holding our world together is feminized, weak, watery. And a couple of pushes from the right direction, which is what's happening now politically, and the whole thing can collapse. Well, there's a bloody house of cards to start with. So if we're all going to go down in the stew, my message to people is, well, at least we know why it happened, as opposed to going down completely clueless, going, did you hear a bang? I didn't hear anything. I prefer we have knowledge of the matter, as desperate as it is.